and welcome to the first pillar of Invest North 2022, International. In the wake of Brexit and the digital revolution that was accelerated by the pandemic, the global economy has changed. And it's certain that the North's future economic success will be driven by the strength of its international trading relationships. Over the next 2-ish hours, we'll hear from a number of panels and speakers, about topics ranging, or as broadly ranging as, what's the best attack brand? Is it a collegiate North or is it competitive city regions? The importance of Freeports, as Alex just mentioned, and how businesses can and are approaching international trade. But first off, I'd like to hand over to Hannah Kendrick from this pillar's sponsor, Squire Patton Boggs, for the first session alongside her panelists.
Good morning. Delighted to be chairing this first session, so welcome and great to be here. Our panellists today, we're joined by Lou Caldwell, who is the chair of the Greater Manchester LEP. We've got Amy Doyle, Director of Client Services of Campaigner, part of the Ziff Davis Global Group, Andrew Kennedy from Sci Life Sciences, and Alistair McGeoch of Roku, Director of Software Engineering. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here. The discussion this morning, we're going to look at the topic of inward investment, which is obviously a great subject to kick off this conference. And in particular, I want to explore with you your thoughts on whether the North as an aggregated region is still an attractive proposition, or whether or not investors are going to prefer sort of the city regions as a stronger prospect. So hopefully, I'm sure you've all got some sort of very strong views on the subject, and looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. Lou, perhaps want to start with you. I mean, you've clearly got a huge involvement on sort of the profile of the North as an inward investment prospect. So really interested to hear from you about your role. And in particular, looking at sort of the Greater Manchester region, we've heard recently about the Innovation Accelerator. So, as part of your role, how do you think that's going to benefit the North as a whole?
Yeah, morning, Hannah. So I'll first of all apologise for background noise. I'm actually at the Festival for Enterprise in Greater Manchester this morning, which is obviously great, but a little bit of a noisy backdrop. So,
no problem.
So as you say, Hannah, so I chair in my non-day job. I chair the Greater Manchester LEP, which is it's obviously an interesting time for LEPs, and Greater Manchester has for many years had a kind of unusual construct in the way that that we run our LEP. My kind of day job, if you like, is as a founder of 22 years ago, who chose to build a business in the North. We put North in the name, so we were called Magnetic North, and so we were very proudly Northern. And actually, we talk a lot about how that shaped the business we were, the people we've done business with, our kind of mission and purpose and values. So I think what we're finding at the moment is it's in a new era, if you like, of what will become Northern Powerhouse. It's quite an interesting time to think about that narrative, particularly from an inward investment perspective. There's a lot of talk, and I'm sure you'll hear this today, of investable propositions. So we tend to think of the whole of the North as an investable proposition, but really we've got to get down to some fairly clear kind of sectoral plays, some particular place-based plays to the point in the introduction and this morning. So I think we've put a lot of focus within Greater Manchester on something we've called Innovation Greater Manchester. That's been driven by the LEP, but really is been driven by the voice of business most fundamentally. So thinking about a whole pan-GM place-based innovation ecosystem and how that acts as an accelerator, not just to levelling up, I guess, across our own economy, because there's still some levelling up to do across Greater Manchester, but how we hold hands with other pieces of the North to do that. So actually, when we think of skills and workforce, we have people that come in and out between Lancashire and Cheshire and Liverpool and Manchester, and largely people don't see those boundaries. So actually it makes a huge amount of sense for us to think, yes, we've been awarded an innovation accelerator through the Levelling Up white paper that was recently announced through government, but we will hold hands across the North, across those different sectors, to hopefully lift the whole of the North. So I think we've always worked in Greater Manchester for a long time to a narrative of a strong Greater Manchester is a strong North, is a strong UK. And I think that's probably, has never been more relevant, has it, to be taking that stance, I think, on how we work with government.
And thanks, Lou. And I love that concept of holding hands across the North. I think that's the phrase we might hear several times, or certainly we should build into the discussion several times today. And Alistair, perhaps coming to you next, please do give us an overview of Roku and your role. And I know you've been open in Manchester only, is it a month? A very short period of time. And we heard Lou there talk about the sort of the strong sectoral plays, and obviously we've got these what we think of as clusters and centres of excellence across the North. I'd be really interested to hear some insight from you on the rationale of Roku choosing the North and Manchester specifically as its sort of UK footfall.
Yeah, so thanks, Hannah. So yeah, I'm one of the directors of software engineering at Roku, and I'm in part of the business that's focused on new product introduction for Roku TV. So that's working with Roku TV brand partners, developing new Roku TV products that are powered by our own OS. And actually, we actually kind of opened our initial office in October last year. So we've just been kind of feeling our way into the ecosystems in Manchester. It's been a really exciting time for Roku. TV streaming is now a global phenomenon, and Roku, we pioneered streaming to the TV. And whilst we serve over 60 million households currently, there are around a billion global broadband households that need a TV OS to bring all the various streaming choices together and be able to access the content that they love easily. So our focus is on how we continue to grow our business and serve more customers globally. And obviously, we need the best talent to help us achieve those goals. Manchester, for us, it's a city that's steeped in engineering history, and it's also famed for its cultural impact in the world. So from those two perspectives, it really was a natural fit for us to make this kind of long-term investment that we're making. It puts us right next to some of the world-leading academic institutions, such as the University of Manchester. And also, as I think Lou touched on, it puts us in the middle of a network of equally renowned digital innovators based at Circle Square neighbourhood. And obviously, from our perspective as well, Manchester is a well-established broadcast hub within Europe, obviously home to Media City. From our perspective as an organisation, we are focused on how we continue to innovate and lead the industry that we're in. And Manchester was incredibly exciting for us in terms of being able to invest in the software expertise in the city. We're really focused initially on building new product introduction teams and looking for product engineers that can work with those brands that I mentioned. For us, it's really a long-term investment. I'm really excited to be in Manchester, and we're really looking forward to being part of the tech ecosystem within the city and helping it grow over the coming years.
Thank you. It's great to hear. I suppose sort of Andrew, just coming over to you, we've heard there about sort of engineering and that ecosystem and some of the specialisms there. In life sciences, obviously, is another massive area, and SCI have based itself at sort of the Alderley Park area. So obviously one of the UK's largest single site life sciences campus, which is great. So similar sort of question to you, really. What attracted SCI to the north, and in particular to Alderley Edge, rather than perhaps that more perhaps traditional golden triangle of sort of Oxford and Cambridge, and please do tell us about SCI and how you've hopefully found the right place.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, many of you will not have heard of SCI Life Sciences. I suspect we're a privately owned Indian contract development and manufacturing organisation. I was the first UK employee back in November 2019. So we're a services-based company. We work with large pharma, biotech companies to help them discover, develop, and then manufacture their small molecule drug substances. Mainly Indian-based, with sites over in Hyderabad where we have discovery, development, and manufacturing expertise. And SCI took the plunge, I guess, to work in a global sense and start to expand overseas. And the UK was selected as a good hub for a sort of centre of excellence here in Alderley Park. And that was very much to be closer to our customers in the US and in Europe, and to establish closer links with those projects that we're working on. So about 3 years ago, I started looking in the UK for suitable sites to set up in. They went to all the usual places where a life science company would go. They looked down in Sandwich, in Kent, in Oxford, Cambridge, some other hubs in Manchester, and Audley Park was eventually chosen. This was before my time. I wasn't part of the decision, but actually I'm really happy that they did make that decision, because it's a fantastic site. And since setting up in November 2019, we felt very much at home here alongside a lot of other life science businesses on the park. There were a few opportunities for customer relations on the site, but also some other services that we can make use of. And what we found is that since I joined in November 2019, we sort of set ourselves up to try and get to around 20 people. We found that recruitment very easy. There's a lot of talent in the area, obviously former AZ staff that maybe haven't moved south, but generally lots of good talent in the chemistry field. And we're very fortunate that our company chose to further invest, and we expanded very quickly. And as of today, we're at 64 employees. And again, that second recruitment round has focused locally on the sort of local universities and the local businesses, but has also attracted people from elsewhere. And I think one of the attractions to the area is obviously that the cost of living is significantly different to where it is in Cambridge and Oxford. And the quality of life in somewhere like Cheshire is really high. So we found it a nice home. We found it easy to recruit people, and we've got a nice ecosystem that we've fitted really well into.
Great, thank you. Exciting times for you there. And just moving, perhaps transitioning back to the Northeast now, Amy. Just to bring you in, I mean, you've been a key member of the sort of the leadership team at Campaigner setting up in the UK. We're obviously sort of, marketing technology. You could be wherever. What do you think has made sort of the Northeast be the right place for you? And obviously, what made that attractive from an investment point of view, from sort of the wider global group?
Sure. So just to kind of give a bit of background as to what Campaigner does, we offer marketing automation through our email and SMS products. So Campaigner is part of the Ziff Davis Moz Group, which is our MarTech division of Ziff Davis. So when Ziff Davis originally came to the Northeast, it was an investment of our former software product, which was known as Communicator, which was also an email marketing platform. Communicator and Campaigner merged just last year, so we're still very, very new in order to bring Campaigner to the UK market. And I think what was originally, a decision to broaden the email marketing portfolio of Ziff Davis Moz Group quickly turned into an exciting growth opportunity, and that's purely through the business makeup of the Northeast. If you look at the Northeast region, from the years of 2015 to 2021, the number of private sector enterprises rose by over 11%. And for Campaigner, that is heavily invested in the SMB space, that gave us a pool of almost 55,000 registered businesses to focus our growth efforts on. And that's in the Northeast region alone, right? Not even if we talk about the North as a general population. So you combine that with the talent. Speaking specifically about Newcastle and Gateshead area in the Northeast, it is a tech hub. And so you have a lot of software companies, a lot of excellent technical agencies that are based there, which means that there's a pool of talent to tap into anytime that we're looking to recruit. And it also means that the recruitment agencies in this area really understand software as a service and what it takes to build those teams. You combine that then with the 5 universities that are on our doorstep, it just means that there is an ability to tap into the core competencies that's required to form a competitive team. And I think one thing, when you're talking to investors who are used to the divisions that I suppose happen state to state, because it's not as easy to move in between states in the US, one thing that's really kind of made them shocked at how easy it is for us to easily reach other regions. I always talk to the investors about how if I want to pitch in London, I can get there by lunchtime. You know, it's a 3-hour train journey from Newcastle Central Station. There's an LNER every 30 minutes. It's not a problem. I'm over in Manchester quite a lot with our customer base, and I always manage to get home in time for dinner. So that's a great opportunity that happens in the Northeast. And then you also look at how we can cross countries. You know, we have a lot of customers that are based in Dublin, and our account management team are able to get a flight that morning, 45 minutes, and they're in Dublin, and I'm reaching into the Irish market as well. So being able to expand our client reach without actually having to expand our physical presence is definitely something that has been, you know, attractive to the Ziff Davis Group when it comes to looking at our business operations.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you touched on it there, Amy, but I think both Alistair and Andrew have also mentioned the sort of the recruitment piece and having the right talent. Do you think it's easier to do that being part of a global group? Do you think it's great? You know, it sort of puts you in the profile of the region. I mean, maybe one for you, Alistair, to say, well, you know, does it help to be properly global presence?
I think so. So from a Roku perspective, we've got an incredibly high caliber set of engineering teams that are based around the world. So from an organisational point of view, it means that the talent pool we can recruit from is global. But despite that sort of geographic spread of the teams, we're an extremely cohesive company. And the teams that we are building in Manchester will work closely with other teams, whether they're based in our other locations in Cardiff, London, Europe, Asia, or the US. At the end of the day, in some of the discussions I've had with candidates so far is that talented people want to work with other talented people that they can learn from. And being part of an international company is a huge draw for talent. And there is the flip side to the ecosystems that we're building in region as well, is that from an international perspective, as members of the regional ecosystems are interacting and working with other tech ecosystems and other geographies, are being exposed to different ways of thinking, new approaches, new innovations, and all that kind of DNA comes back into the regional ecosystem and makes it a richer and valuable experience for everyone involved.
That's great, thank you. So we've touched there a couple of times on sort of ecosystems and what's set up there. Lou, perhaps just coming to you in terms of, do you think that in terms of the perception of the North for sort of businesses looking at inward investment, do you think they see those ecosystems? Do you think we get sort of strong recognition as a region? Perhaps, I mean, we have different examples. You know, Germany is a good example, isn't it, with the Rhine-Ruhr? You know, is it the cities that make the impact, or is it that whole region in your experience?
I think probably, I mean, the nature of an ecosystem now is kind of changed, hasn't it, in a post-pandemic world a little bit, in the sense that people are very focused on a quality of life component, as well as the vibrancy of a city, perhaps in an HQ, as well as their local place. So I think, I mean, and it's interesting from a kind of northern brand perspective, it tends to be only people outside of the North who collectively call it the North. I think once you're here, you know, we think of ourselves as like citizens of Manchester or Newcastle or Liverpool, and we kind of, you know, there's quite distinct specialisms and communities. So I think actually in an international context, people think of the UK, and by the time they're thinking of the UK, largely you know, there's London and everywhere else, you know, at best. I think from a kind of regional identity, short of, you know, that phrase Northern Powerhouse, we tend to think of each of those different cities and city regions having their own individual identities. And I think there's some global recognition, but I think there's more to come now in this next phase of, I suppose, the UK's economic recovery is going to be driven by that very strong levelling up agenda, that very strong regional identity for not just across the North, but the whole of the UK, and where those clusters and those specialisms and those capabilities and those skill sets. So I think I suppose the quick answer is the way it's worked, I think, in the last 10 years is going to be rapidly different now for the next 10, which I think presents us with massive opportunity, actually, for those people and individuals and businesses who are looking for a great quality of life, brilliant access to talent, and being part, as Alistair described, of a specialist community of people who are like-minded and also wrestling with the same problems and the same challenges and the same growth journey.
Yeah, no, of course, and I think that's quite an interesting one, isn't it, in terms of whether or not sort of, you know, how competitive some of the areas can be, or whether we are sort of joined up as a region. I don't know, you know, Andrew, from a life sciences point of view, perhaps a good one to come to. I mean, we've heard about these, we talk about these clusters of specialisms, and we've obviously got, you know, all sorts of areas, life science being one of them, media we've talked about, green energy being something, you know, huge. In your experience, are we joined up as a region, or is there sort of competitive pockets of activity, you know, pulling in, for example, Alderley Edge versus some of the York science parks? Do you feel like you are working as one sort of outward-facing region?
To a certain extent. I mean, during sort of setup, we're obviously aware of quite a lot of similar companies to us in the northern region, and that does create sort of a bit of a competitive environment just from a recruitment perspective, actually. But I think it's also shows that the UK is in a good place from delivering that sort of contract development and manufacturing services, and that there are lots of different options. We're very fortunate that part of the business is thriving at the moment in terms of the business out there. But ultimately there are options throughout the north and throughout the whole of the UK, and I think it's not the sort of business that we're in it's not really necessarily the actual region where we are, whether that makes the difference to us, because our customers are largely overseas. But I think for us the region makes sense because it has those sort of alternative services available to us in the area, so we can go out and get contract analytical services locally, which was really key for us when we were setting up, to ensure that we had some of those sort of external contractors that we could work with as we became a new organisation in the UK.
Thank you. So I mean, again, Amy, coming to you, have you got any experience, or do you feel that we're managing to avoid the north being too sort of parochial and two pockets of clusters, but actually still facing the world and potential inward investors as one region?
Yeah, from my experience, yeah, we are avoiding that. You know, I've mentioned previously that we have a northern base in terms of our customers, and I find that it reminds me a little bit of my Irish roots of, you know, if I notice that someone's Irish, I'm probably going to work with you just because we need to promote each other abroad, right? And I feel like that's very much the same when it comes to northern businesses. I think we have a great support network, and we really do elevate each other and lift each other up when it comes to the success stories. But also I think we're very, very good at sharing the challenges and trying to hack that together to figure out what's the solution that could benefit, you know, all companies, and being very candid about that rather than holding that close to your chest when it comes to, you know, sharing the challenges, especially during the COVID situation. But I also think it's helped for us in the campaigner world. It's helped in terms of recruitment, you know, because we've been able to do most of our work remotely. We've been able to make bases in different parts of the north. So, you know, we have a development team that's based in Sheffield. We have someone else who's based in Leeds. Yes, we have a lot of people that's based in Newcastle, but we also have people in Northumberland area, in the Durham area, over in Manchester. So I think it's that cohesiveness of being able to recruit and therefore spread our wings a little bit across the different cities, as well as getting that buy-in from other companies and that support of other companies. You know, as Lou rightly mentioned, it's London and everywhere else. I feel like the people in the bracket of everywhere else is really, really supports each other and makes sure that they elevate, you know, our success stories within the north. So from my perspective, I don't think we've seen that parochialism, but that's just from us on the private sector.
Yeah. Alistair, I don't know whether would you echo Amy's thoughts? Have you had a similar experience in a very different sector?
Yeah, actually, I mean, touching on a couple of things. Obviously, as Roku, we're kind of new into the region, so we're still kind of finding our feet. It's something that Andrew mentioned around the competitive aspect in terms of recruiting for talent. So obviously that's been at forefront of our mind as we've kind of come into region. But kind of echoing what Andrew said and Amy, what we found so far, certainly the people and organisations I've been meeting with, is very keen to collaborate on those kind of shared challenges that Amy talked about. So I haven't really experienced a kind of parochial kind of edge to anything. And also, in terms of Roku, we have a kind of hybrid view on working now, based, obviously from pandemic perspective. So again, similar to Amy, whilst we'll have, Manchester-based teams, and we'll come in for the key times to be together and collaborate, we'll be drawing talent from across the region. So I expect that kind of parochial edge. I don't think we've experienced so far, and I'm not sure we will.
No, that's great. Thank you. I mean, just Lou, coming back to you. I mean, we at the very start in sort of explaining your role and sort of making sure that you were sort of doing the strength of the individual city regions, but obviously making sure we were joined up. You sort of touched on how far that region spreads, and how do you think, or what more can we be doing to ensure that this sort of whole partnership and the North doesn't miss people out? Some of the smaller towns and cities aren't getting left behind. Is that something that you've sort of got views on what we should be doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. In my experience, this is where business plays a really important part, because actually businesses, by our very nature, are quite good at making things happen, collaborating. Back to the holding hands point. And so actually, what we find in a lot of our work is, public policy and those kind of local boundaries will take you so far, and it needs to be hand in hand with them. But actually businesses don't really see those boundaries, as we're hearing from Amy and everybody today, is actually, we just want to deliver success, and we want to go where the talent is, where the collaborations are, where the partnerships are. So I think this we're in now, we'll see a different role of business leading some of that collaboration, actually, and we're seeing some of that already across some of the sectoral conversations that we've talked about. We're definitely seeing it across the skills agenda. So, to Alistair's point, businesses are coming together and holding hands to shape the requirement with education providers for what's needed. So I think business generally sees a lot less boundaries than politicians and local government. So the more we can create platforms like today and like the festival that I'm joining shortly, that actually bring business together and share those common problems and work together to resolve them. And actually government finds that really compelling. Government kind of welcomes business turning up at its door with ideas and solutions and proposals. So so I have a lot of faith in the North's business community to kind of resolve and make the most of the opportunity over the next couple years.
Yeah, and it sounds like, we may have covered it, but in terms of characteristics that you think that businesses from our region can sort of display on the global stage that will make them attractive to inward investors, is there anything, we've touched on collaboration obviously, but I suspect a lot of regions could claim that. How do we demonstrate it?
Yeah, I do think we're better at that than most. I think there is a kind of shared tenacity, perhaps, to prove our kind of our true capabilities to the world. I mean, I think it's a slightly cliched word, but in a modern sense, that the idea of industriousness, we know, is what attracts a lot of people here. Is that there is a real genuine desire to make things, get on with things, build things, create things, that is somewhere in our DNA across the North, and that's very attractive from an inward investment perspective at a time when we've got a short window of time to drive our economic recovery. So I do think there are some core characteristics, but also back to that quality of life point. Any business that's coming here has to basically persuade people to come and live and work here and bring their children here and and their families. And so we do still consistently get comments from we have a London office as well as a Manchester office, and the general welcome that people get when they come here as business visitors just consistently get commented on. So I think that whole accessibility and openness that we have here is really, really attractive, as well as just a really vibrant cultural scene. Hopefully over the next few years, better transportation and connectivity, but some of those other wider factors that we know people are just looking for as they kind of come to work out where they're going to place their business and grow it.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, and I think would echo everything you say there. I suppose sort of Andrew, Amy, Alistair, just thoughts perhaps in that order about, whether, given the experiences you've had establishing, relatively new businesses or as part of groups in the North, whether there's anything more that you think businesses should be doing to make the case for bringing other investments to the region. Perhaps, Andrew, starting with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's as a sort of a company that's sort of based overseas, I think SCI very much recognised sort of a potential gap in the market and certainly a gap in their capabilities. And the Manchester option seemed the most sensible, and I think that investment in the business here that increased after literally only a year shows that once someone is actually set up in the region, the benefits are really evident, and we were expecting to be a very small organisation, 20 or so staff, and we were going to tick over like that for a few years, but actually the company realised that actually the opportunities at Audley Park to expand and to create more business for the company was really evident from day one. So I think it's just that inertia of moving into the region, if it's an overseas company, just attracting those businesses to get started here. I think what we found is then that sort of catapulted us really quickly.
Mm. So I mean, Amy, it feels like this sort of getting the success stories out there is a really good way, obviously an obvious way, part of what we're doing now, of course, getting the success stories out there to sort of attract investment. Is there anything else you think you wish you'd known or that wish you'd been available to you when sort of getting your Northeast presence up and running?
To me, I think it's just that. I think it's the exposure, right? I think that businesses need to shout about their successes, but also other businesses need to promote it. LinkedIn is great at fostering that type of culture, but there's other things that I think we could go a step further with, just thinking of website presence. How can you be a guest contributor on your supplier's blog channel and explain all the benefits that supplier has had for you and your business, and really put it into, terms that investors understand, which tends to be about impact to the bottom line, and I think that allows you to create alliances where possible, whether that be joining together to co-pitch on a service offering or subcontract part of a tender that you've won that maybe you're not strongest at. How do you subcontract and bring another northern businesses into the fold when it comes to that? And I think it requires business leaders really to be informed about what companies are on your doorstep, who's in, not just in the city regions, but as Lou mentioned, in the towns next door to those cities. Who are your competitors? And if you were to lose a piece of business, can you refer it to them in the hope that they will do the same for you in future and keep it within the region? But then also, who are the big players in your space? And, how can you as the business leader be that bridge of communication to form a mini network that allows every participant to share, learn and grow from the information that you can collectively share? And I think, the final thing that I try to do most is know the data, like look at the LEP websites. Northeast LEP gives me everything I need to make a business case to the guys in New York to say, look, this is why I think that the Northeast is a place that we should trial this growth opportunity. And it has allowed me to many times put up my hand and say, we can own this expansion project within the Northeast. We have the data. We know that there's enough of a marketplace there within this region to take that risk and try it out, but not, require too much additional investment. And really it comes to that, when there's an opportunity in your business, whether that's growth or recruitment, putting up your hand and confidently explaining to senior leadership why the north of England is the place that they should start. I think that's really what it all comes down to.
Thanks. Alistair, coming to you.
Yes, I think Amy hit a lot of my kind of experience in the first few months at Roku, in that when I first sort of came into the city centre and then went up to Circle Square to look at where we'll be in about a year's time. I don't think we fully appreciated the kind of opportunities within Manchester for our business. And so part of what I've been sort of doing in my role is making sure that the leadership of our organisation know the kind of opportunities and things we can engage with as an organisation. So I think part of it, to touch on the points that have been made, I think part of it is marketing, the vibrancy of the talent pool, the vibrancy of the collegiate kind of atmosphere, people, the willingness to collaborate. That was certainly something I've been it took me a little bit by surprise at the beginning, and certainly something I've been leaning into and learning more of, similar to what Amy's was saying, as I've got more and more embedded in where we are and what we're trying to achieve. So I think it is a bit of kind of marketing and making sure that what's on offer within region is understood by not only the businesses already within region, but also other businesses that may be considering where they go next to drive their next stage of growth.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Alistair, you mentioned sort of the academic institutions in the universities. Presumably the profile of those is key as well, in particularly in sort of specialist sectors like the businesses that you're all working with.
Yeah, so I mean, the plans that we have for Manchester are long term, and we won't be able to fulfil all of that by just going at the kind of mature talent market. We'll need to build early career pathways and all those relationships with academic institutions and things like that. So we're looking at a more holistic approach for how we establish ourselves within the city. So all these things come into account when we consider where we set up office locations. I mean, Manchester's the fourth local location in the UK. We've been in Cambridge for around 8 years, London and Cardiff. So we had a number of opportunities or options when we considered where we went next, but Manchester was the standout for us.
Great, thank you. Just conscious of everybody's time, and it's fantastic to hear so much talk about collaboration in the future, and in particular talent. You know, it's such a sort of it feels a very exciting time. You know, sort of the future of the region, I think, helped by you know, sort of the lifestyle elements and sort of obviously post-pandemic issues. But we wanted to talk in this session about sort of becoming the North, becoming the go-to brand, and one of the things we were looking at is whether or not, as an aggregated region, the North has got a better chance of being outwardly facing and getting that inward investment, or whether or not the city regions in themselves are a stronger prospect to go out onto the world stage, sort of perhaps more individually. I'd just like to finish off really by coming to each of you for that sort of conclusion. You know, your final thoughts. I can probably have a good stab about what some of them will be, but perhaps I don't know, Andrew, are you happy for me to come to you first? So, you know, with your final thoughts.
It's quite interesting from Sci's perspective. We actually call ourselves Sci Life Sciences Manchester, and that is mainly because that if we called ourselves Sci Life Sciences Alderley Park, a lot of our global customers, actually our other staff in India, wouldn't understand where that is or wouldn't know that place. So we took the Manchester brand because Manchester's a big city, they know the football club, etc., etc. So we've used the Manchester brand, but actually we're not in Manchester really. We're in Cheshire, we're in Alderley Park. So I think we took that just purely because of the nature of our business to make it a bit more recognisable. So taking that city name, despite not actually being in the city. So that's just, I guess, a different perspective from our side, is that it was more about familiarity, I guess, with customers and our staff in India, so they could actually understand where we were in the world, really, because with saying Alderley Park, they wouldn't know where in the UK we probably were. So yeah, that was our perspective.
Great.
So that's really interesting, Andrew, because we do the opposite. We say we're in the north of England. And that's where everybody knows from us, from, like, you know, our team in Ottawa and Canada. We have a team in Seattle, Vancouver, Raleigh in North Carolina. We have a team over in other parts of Europe as well. And just to say, the north of England actually resonates more for them than Newcastle. But also with our customer base over in America, we say the north of England. For them, it just sounds like they can picture it. Newcastle, they're going, I'm not sure if that's north or south. So we do the opposite. We brand ourselves as the north of England.
That's really interesting. And Lou, perhaps coming to you for a final thoughts.
Yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, Andrew and Amy probably just highlighted it depends who you're talking to and what level. and what experience. But I think the reality is we'll continue to do both. I think we'll end up, I mean, the reality is, each of those brands, whether it's the North as a whole or those individual places, they're in this context, they're largely branded by their output, so I think if we think of some of the huge kind of inward investment success stories, like, the Silicon Valley example, nobody sat down and wrote a brand strategy. It's famous because of its output and what's been created there. And so really, we'll become known for what we're excellent at, and the success stories, that come out of the region from a business perspective is quite difficult in a sense for us to control that. However, I do think, generally we can always be better at telling our story, and we do have bits of both enterprise and government that go on the world stage and tell our story. And so thinking carefully about when we talk as a connected North versus when we talk as an individual city region is quite important. And I think it would probably be remiss of me if I didn't mention transport. So I think the reality is we only really unlock the true potential of a connected North and a single if we actually are a connected North. So I think, obviously, I'm sure it'll be discussed today, but from an investment perspective, from a government perspective, there's still clearly some work to do on that front, in that, we're not yet in a position where we can be 30 minutes away from Leeds, Liverpool, Lancashire, an hour away from Newcastle, that real connectivity. When we've got that becomes an incredibly saleable proposition, which of course was the whole original Northern Powerhouse vision, and that opportunity. So that opportunity still exists, but we might just need a bit of hardware to help us get there.
That's great. Thank you. Alistair, just coming to you for any final thoughts.
I think to be honest, when Lou said summed it up as depends on who you're talking to, I think that's kind of reflects my experience when I'm talking within the other leaders within the UK. Obviously, we refer to identify as Manchester, and then depending if we're talking with some of the more global teams, there's maybe a bit more work to do to kind of educate about where we are in the offering. So yeah. It kind of resonates with myself, but being new to the kind of the discussion, we're still feeling our way into it a bit, I think.
Yeah. Excellent. It's been so exciting to hear about, obviously, these sort of three businesses and their journeys in the region, or the start of their journeys, hopefully, in the region, and so much sort of common thought in terms of collaboration and what we've got to offer. So I think probably the five of us are totally convinced this is the right place for global business to set down and thrive from. But hopefully the rest of the conference over the course of today will sort of drill down a little bit more about how we deliver that. But part of what we've talked about is getting those success stories out there. So thank you very much, Alistair, Amy, Andrew, and Lou for joining the discussion. And it's been great to talk to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Hannah, and thank you to all the panelists. It's certainly teed us up for the rest of the day. I think they definitely mentioned talent, which will be starting at 1:45. They talked about transport, which I know my colleagues will be talking about in place later. And we got our first mention of football clubs, but I will not get on to where my allegiances lie there. Next up, my colleague Alex Turner is sitting down with Tim Noons, the Chief Executive of Manchester's inward investment agency, Midas, to talk about how the city has managed to continue its successful approach to inward investment, despite the challenges of the last 2 years, and how it links opportunities in the city centre with, well, other parts and other districts of Greater Manchester to help fuel the growth around there. So I will shortly be handing that over to Alex now.
Tim, let's start off with March 2022. Are you excited about the pipeline of opportunities you've got on your desk at the moment?
I'm really excited about them. In the year we're in, we'll finish this year as a record year certainly for Midas and for Greater Manchester as well. in terms of the investment numbers that we're getting through, particularly in terms of job creation. But that isn't stopping. The pipeline intake that we've seen over the last sort of 6 months plus is still really healthy. We've got a sizable amount of projects that are we sort of rag rate ours, traffic light system it to show which projects are green. So, have a very high percentage chance of landing, right through to red, obviously where there's challenges. But, that green section, if you like, for us looks really strong next year already. And that's before, we've sort of taken in the projects. There's still a healthy percentage of our projects, so 40% plus, that will come in within that year. So the fact that we're already seeing sort of over 2,000 jobs in that green category for next year now, and about 6,000 in the amber category, which 30-40% of that will almost certainly come off as well, is really, really positive. So, but I think it's the actual types of projects that are coming through that's the most exciting piece. The complexity of them, how they add to the economy here. We've got a number of what I would call transformational projects, major manufacturing projects that have the opportunity to create hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs. And potentially as well, they're looking at areas of Greater Manchester that don't currently have a huge volume of high value jobs, some of our more deprived areas, if you like, of Greater Manchester. And so for me, it's, very high value projects through, connecting it to our universities, our innovation, our high value sort of assets that we have through programs like Innovation GM, for example. We're starting to really see the focus that we've had over the last 18 months come through and deliver some really, really exciting high value projects, but into parts of Greater Manchester that really need it.
How has the last couple of years changed how you've gone about, attracting inward investments?
I think it's about agility, really. I think, like any business, really, you try and be as agile as you can to adapt to the environment. So, in terms of, if you like, how we do outreach, as we've not been able to travel, even within the UK, at times, obviously we've pivoted, we've done a lot more digital activity. So we've maintained our activity overseas, if you like, but just obviously switched to virtual. So virtual events, virtual seminars, etc. in the US, in Germany, in Japan, all over the world, and a lot with India as well over that time. And so we've managed to maintain a lot of those relationships and a lot of that profile. And likewise, how we actually push, if you like, the PR as well. We work very closely with Marketing Manchester on that profile raising piece, and how we promote some of the success stories like Cloud Imperium, for example, that invested recently. The statistics around that particular investment, in terms of opportunities to see, how many eyeballs, if you like, actually saw that, was absolutely phenomenal. It's the most impact we've ever had in terms of a particular press release. So, both, if you like, the digital marketing side, digital sales side, if you like, but also, for a period of time, particularly the first 6 months of the pandemic, we focused on the businesses that were already here, and looking to protect them, first of all, make sure they were, they had what they needed to survive, if you like. And B, we used that opportunity also to look at, the opportunities for further investment as well. And particularly in those areas where Greater Manchester's sort of economic focus is, like innovation, for example, low carbon, good employment, all these different things we were focusing on with our 300 plus large strategic and foreign owned companies that we account manage locally. And that reaped big dividends last year in terms of expansions from those companies. And it continues to bring dividends into this year as well.
Tim, in terms of that partnership working, you've got a key project, Innovate. Tell us exactly how that brings everyone together.
Yeah, so like I say, our sort of aim is to further embed companies in the sort of Greater Manchester ecosystem, if you like, but also, try and facilitate new opportunities as well at the same time, and new sort of value. So the Innovate Manchester programme that you mentioned that's where we sort of try to bring together large firms, small firms, and universities to look at effectively new intellectual property that could be created to solve current industry challenges, essentially. So what we've generally done is take a large firm. Manchester City actually was one of them that we used. They put out a challenge to the market. We advertised that challenge, created an event for a load of SMEs to come together to discuss it with Manchester City. Then those that had good ideas that wants to take this forward, we take to what we called a design sprint to sort of really hone down on those ideas and sort of test them and challenge them. And the universities are involved in that. And then, the one or two, if you like, that make it past that stage as well, then go on to potentially form, well, hopefully, what is new commercial IP that works, where they've got a large firm that's a potential buyer as well. And from their perspective, they've got a new product or service that has a marketplace, essentially, because the likelihood is we've done it with, over cybersecurity and defense. We've done it over low carbon. We've tried to pick themes that are relevant, that are current, that are future facing. And therefore, any new IP that's created is going to have a marketplace and global demand. So, that's one of the initiatives that we've run over the last few years to try and facilitate that. But likewise, we work really closely with these companies that we account manage that I mentioned, and we're constantly looking at further ways of embedding them. Even companies that have been here for over 75 years, like Kellogg's, we will still be putting them in touch with Manchester Metropolitan's nutrition unit or something to look at their research and development around how they reduce sugar in products without losing taste. Or, I pluck that example from the air, but those types of things, it's relevant for those types of companies as well as it is, as I say, a QIAGEN that's working on really advanced genetic diagnostics. So yeah, it's our role to embed companies further and leverage those assets that we have.
And how important is it to always be asking that, what's next question? And, particularly you mentioned earlier around innovation and low carbon.
Yeah, it is really important, because a company that's not transforming digitally, for example, we know will gradually be left behind. And therefore that'll put a threat on the operations here, on the future staff. And so if it's a manufacturer, are they sort of manufacturing in a sector that is high growth? So we've got a couple of big manufacturers, for example, of semiconductors in Greater Manchester, like an Experian Diodes up in the northeast of the conurbation. And, they're right in the heart of sort of global manufacturing demand, because they supply the automotive sector with semiconductors, which are massive, there's a massive shortage of. So how we sort of work getting more capacity in those sorts of organizations while, demand is high. But then likewise, we might turn to another producer and look at, is their product in a declining market? Therefore, is there any diversification of product that company could look at that then takes them into a growth sector and therefore protects the existing jobs and facility? Again, that could be across multiple industries in something like manufacturing, from the food industry, where again tastes change. So you look at how you develop that, how you sort of work with a company to say, right, well, of the other product ranges that you produce, potentially elsewhere in the world, what are those where demand is growing, and how can we work with you to attract investment in that production line here, so that it actually sustains and gives a future to that factory? So, obviously, a lot of the businesses are doing it anyway. So, they're not necessarily just sat there waiting for things to happen. But, we take a proactive approach to that to try and make sure that, if you like, we're giving them the support that we can to push the business case internally.
Bring you back to something you said at the start about the potential transformational projects that could benefit some of the less well-served parts of the region. Should we be talking about inward investment more in our conversations about levelling up?
Yeah, I think it is often talked about in a levelling up agenda. How inward investment is part of that solution, and in a way, the government sees that as well, national government and local government, in deals that it's helped facilitate, like British Volt and the Nissan battery manufacturing. They've put a lot into that, and that is very much with that levelling up sort of hat on, if you like, that they're doing those things. And the announcement in the levelling up white paper around the innovation accelerator for Greater Manchester, that was a direct result of the work that's been done by colleagues in Greater Manchester. It's a real joint effort between public and private partnership to come up with that strategy. Government have acknowledged it as being a driver for growth, and therefore, but inward investment, is one of the critical parts of that initiative. Because if we're trying to essentially level up Greater Manchester by translating high value activity from some of the central areas of Greater Manchester, around the University District, Corridor, Media City, those sorts of areas, into the areas like Rochdale, Oldham, etc., which haven't had as much of that high value activity over the last few decades. Then we've got to look at how we use new new investment to come in to look at the university strengths, but then actually deliver their activity in places like Northern Gateway and Bury and Rochdale. We've seen that with the National Physical Lab and partners in Rochdale and companies like Holroyd up there coming together with the University of Manchester as well to create this AMPI, this Advanced Machinery and Productivity Institute that's going to go into Rochdale, for example. And again, that's not the only type of catalytic institute that we want to create in places like Rochdale around those sites. And so that is part of that journey of translating high value activity from currently central areas into areas like Rochdale.
What might stop Greater Manchester achieving some of its ambitions?
Well, obviously, the global economy we are subject to, in the way that last year our figures were heavily affected by last financial year, I should say. Our figures were heavily affected by the pandemic. We secured about 2,000 jobs rather than the sort of 4,000 jobs that we would have hoped. We bounced back this year. We're probably going to be up to 4,500, 5,000 jobs hopefully this year. So that shows good bounce back. And some of those jobs, will have been delayed over COVID. So it's we're starting to see them come back through now. So we're susceptible to, if you like, global events as anyone else is. I think we've proved to be relatively resilient through the last couple of years, and our figures certainly prove that, and our speed of recovery certainly proved that. But yeah, whether it's pandemics, whether it's obviously at the moment, not just trade wars, but actual wars, that we're seeing, that they all potentially affect confidence of investors. And therefore, that's what we've just got to be mindful of always is, how we build confidence with investors in this place so that, whatever the weather, which obviously isn't always spot on in Greater Manchester, but whatever the weather, that investors feel confident that this is a place where they can invest safely, relatively low risk and high gain.
Thanks, Alex and Tim, and certainly important to hear the fact that the confidence is still there in the market and moving forward that Greater Manchester, and I'm sure the other northern cities will continue to leverage their international ambitions and drive that in with investment. So we're now moving away from Manchester and heading both east and west, and we're going to talk about Freeports and whether they are the gateway to prosperity that perhaps the government think they are. So before I welcome my two panelists today, it's important that we recognise there has been a lot said already about the opportunity provided by Freeports. They're considered by government a key piece of post-Brexit economic policy, with supporters seeing them as a way that you can create a cluster and kickstart regeneration. So I'm certain the next 20 minutes should be filled with talk of ambition and positivity. And without further ado, I would like to bring on my panelists. So thankfully, I am joined by John Lucy, Director of Liverpool Freeport, and by David Williams, Head of Policy Communication and Economic Development for the Humber at the Associated British Ports. So thank you very much for joining me, gentlemen. First question, I'll throw it to you first, John. When do we expect Liverpool Freeports to be operational? You're just muted, John. I'm afraid I can't hear you. I'll go to David first while we attempt to get John back. So David, same question to you, but let's talk Humber. And as I'm a Yorkshire editor, that makes it slightly more enjoyable for me.
It's fine. Liverpool's always slightly behind the Humber, so that's absolutely fine. The good news, I think, for us is that we'll be among the first to be up and running. we were amongst the 8 Freeport areas around the country that were given the status back in the Chancellor's budget last March. But then in the October autumn statement, we were one of the 3 areas that were given the green light for our tax status powers. So that along with Tees and the Thames, the Humber is in that first, the early tranche to get through to the next stage. So we've submitted our final business case to the government at the end of January on the deadline that they asked for, and we're expecting to hear the final approval of everything probably in early April. And that's the green light. We'll be up and running and operational from that point. So we expect it to be really in just around a couple of months' time to be up and running. The good news for us is that we've got some low-hanging fruit that we can pick quite quickly. So we should have actual businesses delivering and bringing growth into the area very quickly after we're up and running.
That's fantastic. And I guess, can you explain a little bit more about Freeport, about how Freeports operate in both the practical and physical terms, of the physical space, etc., and everything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the name is a little bit confusing, and I think it has, because I think probably as time has moved on, the policy has morphed a little bit. So I think originally the government had a vision for Freeports along the sort of style that you might see all over the world in various other places for a very traditional classic version of Freeports. Actually, what it's turned out is to be a very British version of that, which will probably be better be named as maritime enterprise zones, and I think that would be a more accurate description of them. So they are a combination of 2 things. They're either some tax status powers, which are there to incentivize investment from big manufacturers, research and development organizations, and that kind of growth inward. But then there's also custom zones, which are the more traditional Freeport element in terms of some tariff-free movements inside the Freeport area. So in the Humber's case, we've got 3 tax zones dotted all around the Humber, and we've taken in a really big geography. So it stretches all the way from Goole over in the west side, all the way through to taking the Port of Immingham on the eastern side. So it covers a huge geographic area. But there are 3 tax sites, one in Goole, one in east of Hull, and one on the south bank of the Humber, just next to Immingham and the Killingham area. And each of those have powers in those tax sites to speeding up planning processes, to holidays from national insurance contributions from employers, but also stamp duty and land tax holidays from that as well. The ability to retain business rates, so there's a real benefit to the local area in being involved in that. So the business rates that are collected in from that can then be redistributed to other economic areas. But what it creates is a really business-friendly place to invest. And if they are located next door to port operations, you've also then, as an investor, got access to international markets and to bringing in your supplies and your component parts for manufacturing. So it's a really attractive bit. And the idea is for us to be able to market, not just simply within the UK, but globally, to be attractive places to bring business in.
Thank you very much, David. And John, welcome back. So on to you and giving us a little bit of an update on Liverpool's Freeport and when you think that will be ready and operational. Seems we might have lost John again. So the joys of internet connections at points. So David, going on that, what you said, that perhaps the naming way is slightly misplaced. We've had Freeports in the UK before, when we were an EU member state between 1984 and 2012. Are the new Freeports an evolution of that, or are they a completely different concept?
They're a very different beast to the former Freeports, and I think the key bit is that most people think of Freeports as being a tariff-free movement of goods, so that goods can come into that Freeport zone inside the UK, but they've not actually joined the UK tax zone at that point. You can do value-added work to it and then send it back out to international markets. And if it's going outside the UK, you don't pay a tariff on that movement. There is still that provision within the customs zone element of the Freeport, but actually, by and large, this is much more closely aligned to enterprise zones. They're essentially glorified enterprise zones. There's a lot more than just those powers in there, but they're similar type of powers. They're there to be really attractive to international investors, and that's why they're very different. And the other ones, you could argue, they made some difference, but they may not have been transformative. This is a very different beast, and fingers crossed, they will certainly deliver some work. We've suggested in the Humber that we deliberately gone with a conservative figure. We think this is going to create around 7,000 jobs that our plan is, we'll smash that figure and do a lot more than that. But we're cautiously saying 7,000 to be careful. And we think that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there. We expect in the first year to deliver quite a number of those.
Fantastic. Right, John, we've got you back. Third time lucky. Can you give me the timings for when you think the Liverpool Freeport will be operational?
Yeah, thanks very much. And hopefully the 4G will hold out for long enough for me to answer. This year, our outline business case has been approved. We're now submitting the final business case along with the second wave of Freeport. So we should have a formal government approval in July, which then allows us to access the seed capital funding, which we then really start ploughing into our investments.
I think we might have spooked it with the saying we're holding out for 4G to keep going. So, obviously, we're talking about the fact that there is the whole of the northern economy has, well, 2 Freeports, one on either side of it. How important do you think that's 3? Sorry.
There's cheese as well.
The people in the northeast are going to be hounding me down now. There's 3 in the northern region. Now, how important do you think that's going to be, and what opportunities can that create for the places that don't necessarily directly have one, but will have access to it by being by the transport connectivity? What opportunities?
Well, I think it creates a lot. So, and I think forget Freeports for a second. Ports themselves are catalysts for economic growth, and there's just in the Humber ports alone, there's around 42,000 jobs that are associated with the work of the ports in the Humber, but they're not all based in the Humber. So quite a lot of those are in Leeds or in Wakefield or even further afield into Manchester as well, where the work they're doing directly is reliant on the supplies that they're getting in and out from the Humber ports all the time. So we are enablers of growth in lots of ways. The other thing that we've got, and this is where Freeports come in, is most of the port operators certainly in the north of England have got available developable land next to them. So these are great in terms of bringing jobs to a wider hinterland. Now, if you are bringing a big manufacturer to an area and they're going to benefit from all the things that Freeport have got, it's not just those jobs directly that are going to be employed by that manufacturer. It's the wider knock on to the supply chain for across the board where you'll see the benefits. So the idea, if you've got one in the Tees, one in the Humber, one in Liverpool, you've got a triangle that you're creating around the whole of the north, that everything in the middle should benefit from it too.
That's always good to hear. And I guess let's go back into some of the things you've said previously. You mentioned you've got some low hanging fruit, and obviously the conservative estimate of 7,000 jobs. What is it who is it that you're targeting, or the sort of businesses that you're talking to already ahead of launch? Because I imagine you want this to hit the ground running.
Well, a really good example would be Pensana Group, who are one of the major players in the world for the rare earth metals recycling market. They have already announced that they are going to come and set up their new facility in Hull. And so that's going to employ probably around about 500 jobs, I think, for the construction process, and then about 150 jobs, skilled, really good jobs, ongoing once the facility's up and running. And they've been really clear that they have chosen their location because it's inside the Freeport zone. And they've been very public around that. And so, it's skilled work in rare earth recycling. That's a very future-based technology as well, because it helps to play into the green environment. There's another one that's immediately next door to that, which is which we haven't yet signed on the dotted line, so I don't want to name the organisation, but they're involved in the creation of blue hydrogen, which will be a very green solution to helping to decarbonise our economy. And actually, that's the big USP that the Humber Freeport's putting forward. The Humber is the biggest carbon polluting part of the UK. We've got a lot of very big traditional industries which are big carbon pollutants. That's a bad thing, but it's also a real opportunity because we've got a lot of businesses who are really keen to decarbonise, and the Humber Freeport is there to incentivise businesses. We've got a whole package of measures we're going to use to incentivise to try and decarbonise what we're doing.
Fantastic. Right, we've got John back. He's now apparently on a Wi-Fi connection, so fingers crossed this one works. John, you were just explaining the sort of timings for Liverpool and plans moving forward.
Yeah, so we've got the 3 tax sites, as David explained for the Humber. All the Freeports are the same model, 3 tax sites and multiple custom sites. And I think, if anything really for your audience to take away from today is the Freeports are accelerators of development. So they really, really are sort of going to turbocharge investments into the Freeports areas. One could argue that investment may come in 10, 20, 30 years' time, but the tax benefits and the easements are so substantial. I think we're all in the Freeport world seeing the attraction of this, and the investors are seeing it really does make sense to take advantage of these opportunities now. So, as I say, we've got I think it's about 800 hectares of development land ready now. All with planning permission available to go as and when developers come through. We've got some very exciting developers and investments that we can't talk about right now, but we'll see some signs of this back end of this year.
So it all feels very exciting, and as you've both alluded to, it feels like it's creating lots of opportunity. The government have sort of put their flag on it as it's going to support the regeneration. I guess, what's the evidence that we should be looking for when we think is it actually working? And I know you guys will probably say it'll definitely work. We're confident, as you've alluded to, David. You've got businesses already looking to invest. John, you've talked about having conversations with developers. But what is it that the general public should think? Well, actually, look, this Freeports initiative is properly delivering for our local economies.
I think one should look around the world and see what's happened elsewhere. There's some 3,500 Freeports free zones around the world. And all of them are being successful. They tend to be used as a regeneration tools for faltering economies or for developing countries. And the success, my personal background, I was very involved in a project in Morocco, Tangier Med, which is basically just an empty piece of ground. And that's, in 20 years, they propelled themselves from the economy that they were in now to being one of the most advanced economies in Africa, number one port in Africa, number one port in the Mediterranean Straits. Investment value to Morocco is in the billions of dollars per year, 90,000 jobs created, etc., etc. So the success story of Freeports is factual. So I know they've been tried in the past, but that was when we entered them in the 1980s. I think there was a lack of joined up thinking that they didn't realise, or someone that misunderstood that the effect of going into the European Union would have on the customs benefits. So they were beneficial for the time that they were in place in the UK, certainly in the Liverpool area. It was only when legislation from the EU gave the benefits to the EU, embedded the Freeport benefits into EU customs policy. So that was ethanol for the original batch of Freeports in the UK, which were initiated before we went into the EU, and then once we was in the EU customs union, they lacked their power and the pull.
And just talking about that, we've touched on it, and David, you've explained about the fact that the North's got these three Freeport areas. How closely are you all working together, or is it competitive? And that's the question that always comes about when we're talking about the North. Are we being collegiate or competitive? Obviously, the Humber and Liverpool, there may be some investors who are footloose and fancy free, but there may be some who have a connection already. How closely are you all working together? David, for instance, first.
Well, they are intentionally competitive. So the idea is we are all fishing in the same pool for investors. So that is inherently there is a competition in there, but there is some collaboration in terms of helping to make sure that we're set up well together, and that in terms of infrastructure. So, for example, we talk regularly to our counterparts in the Port of Liverpool around how we improve the transport connectivity throughout the North, because we both benefit from that. So there is some collaboration, but in terms of going out in a competitive market, it is competitive, and that's what you would expect it to be, because the UK is having to compete in that market as well. So various bits of the UK will do as part of that too. And I think the litmus test for me is around jobs. Actually, it's two tests. It's one around how many jobs, and two, the quality of those jobs that are being created. Because what we're not targeting is low-paid, low-skilled work. We're targeting investment in really skilled manufacturing, future-based jobs that are around decarbonisation, that are all skilled, good employment that will have a really beneficial knock-on impact for the wider area in terms of lifting the whole economic performance of the area.
Fantastic, John. And I guess David's touched on the fact that there seems to be a decarbonisation focus with the Humber, particularly. The area's already got a good green energy story to tell, and that's happening in other parts away from the Freeports area. Is there a specific area that Liverpool's targeting, or are you also looking at that similar decarbonisation agenda?
No, and to be fair, it's in the DNA of all the Freeports development that we must and we will be considering the decarbonisation of the logistics infrastructure within our region. So in our instance, our example, we have decarbonising the port itself within the port, but also within the logistics activities within our 45-kilometre zone. So our tax sites are actually possibly like the Humbers, well away from the port itself, and the activities, the transport generated from those, we are looking actively with other free ports around the country to modal shift, lower carbon initiatives to obviously reduce the emissions to and from the port and in between these tax sites. So we're being quite successful in this area, for example, on the passenger transport side of things, because we've already started initiative with 20 hydrogen buses on green passenger routes. So we're looking at developing this concept into possibly green freight routes, connecting our tax sites to the port and so on and so on. So we are very instrumental, we will be very instrumental from the back end of this year into decarbonising the transport activities within the region itself. And also some of our sites are connected to the other ports around the country by rail. So we have one site in particular that can increase the number of trains per day from 2 to 7. Each train carries 50 trucks, the equivalent of 50 trucks worth of load. So it's all happening in this space really. And I think like the Humber as well, we also have a very strong and growing offshore wind sector, and we are one of the only 2 sites in the country developed for the HyNet hydrogen rollout. So we're seeing that starting already, really. So everything we're doing revolves around the net zero and the decarbonisation of transport, logistics, etc.
Fantastic. And then a final question then to you both is, we're sat here now, March 2022. You've said it's imminent in terms of the Humber, and there'll be announcements from sort of summer onwards, I imagine, for both of you. But in 18 months' time, say we're sat here summer 2023, what do you want to be able to? What do you hope you'll have seen or hope to be announcing from sort of moving forward? And I'll start with you, David, if that's all right.
Well, in 18 months' time, we hope firstly the company's up and running. In fact, we hope that's going to be done in the next 2 months. But actually, we've already secured people invested. You will already have seen shovels in the ground for new facilities being built. And I think there's at least 2 that will be companies where that will be true. So in 18 months' time, you will see the people starting to begin the process of recruiting actual real jobs in the area.
Fantastic. And same question to you, John.
Yeah, well, we're fortunate really. Our largest tax site has actually already started with shovels on the ground to create a brand new motorway junction onto the M6. So, which again, going into our net zero ambitions, takes a lot of all the freight traffic and commuting away from any housing developments nearby, straight onto the M6 access and exit. And also within 18 months, we'll certainly have started some cleaner, greener freight movements to and from the ports, and the tax sites utilising the latest technology that's available for trucks, be that electric or hydrogen powered, whatever is available and the best in class at the time. We will be starting to introduce some of these new commercial vehicle technologies into moving the freight around. And we're also heavily involved with working with Peel and the maritime sector in the decarbonising of the water side of the Freeports, if you like, the river side.
Sure, it's clear that there's a lot of potential hanging there, and as not even low hanging fruit. It feels like it's almost there, if not signed on the dotted line in some cases, David. So I'm certain that when we do speak moving forward, there'll be plenty of positivity to talk about. In terms of, you've talked about the conservative estimate of jobs. I've got to ask: is there a bolder statement than that 7,000, David?
Not one that I'm going to put an announcement to now, but more than 7,000.
Thank you very much. I couldn't get away with not asking. And similar to you, John, have you got a figure for how many jobs you expect to create?
Well, we've estimated a figure of 10,000, which I think is a very conservative estimate, looking at some of the other Freeports around the country. But we've got, and you've got to make your estimate somewhere and do the modelling. And our modelling is based on 26 million square feet of development space. So that's calculated into the number of staff in those sites alone, but it doesn't really include the sort of the spin-off service areas and the professional services which will come in behind, the physical infrastructure that can be seen behind the Freeports. And we're seeing equal interest from across every sector. So I would like to
Fantastic. Well, it's clear that both Liverpool and the Humber have a lot of positivity to talk about, and there's going to be a lot of jobs created moving forward. So thank you very much to both my panelists, and then thank you for your time, and I hope to speak to you soon about the successes that you're actually delivering.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we're moving on from Freeports, which will obviously provide an opportunity for the region, but we're now going to go global, or at least talk about how the northern powerhouse and northern businesses are doing so. So whether it's driven by necessity or chances created by a new vision, businesses from across the north are reshaping their trading relationships and taking their products and services to a global market. I'm delighted today to be joined by a panel of experts who will be discussing this, about their approaches, the challenges they've faced, and what their hopes are for the future. So I'd like to welcome my panel to the stage, please. I'm joined by Marcus Malinga of Yuzuki, co-founder and director, Helen Jennings, the finance director at Trio Healthcare, and Thomas Webb, the deputy director of regions from the Department for International Trade. So thank you very much all for joining me. I guess a quick first round robin question would be, during this period of great uncertainty, how have you come through Brexit and the pandemic, and how have you seen how it's changed your business and operations? And I'll start with you, Helen.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. So I guess for everyone, combination of Brexit and COVID was a double whammy, doubly challenging for everyone. The major impact early on that we had, we've been developing a brand new technology, working with partners out in Berlin in Germany. The minute everyone hit shutdown, that all came to a stop. So we had to be quick and actually relocated some of the manufacturing capabilities into our factory in Skipton for the trial period, so we could have products ready to go to trial and didn't have to stop our development. Now, luckily, now we're out of the worst of both Brexit and COVID. We are pushing up that production back out to Germany to get us up to scale for our global launch. So that was, I guess, the biggest challenge for us. The other one we had was obviously trading anything in and out of Europe immediately post-Brexit was an interesting experience. We certainly had some highs and lows on that, and some inconsistencies on which countries were implementing which rules and how consistent they were. And actually early on we made an assumption that the easiest way to trade would be to use some of the big freight companies, the likes of FedEx, DHL, UPS. We were working on the basis that they would have had hundreds of people working on the Brexit implications for the years running up to it. But in actual fact, that wasn't the case. They were not the most reliable purely because of the volume they're trying to deal with. And we even tried to do it ourselves a couple of times, actually had our guys in vans driving in and out. That was another interesting experience. When we had our brand new products on it, we couldn't let them out of our sight for that reason. So we did that and got them through eventually. But the final solution we ended up with is actually using a local freight forwarding service who are able to provide us with a much better bespoke service. And actually that's now one of our strongest relationships, our best resource for export logistics, using a local Yorkshire-based company.
Fantastic. Marcus, same question to you.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, our production ramped up massively because we sell physical products. We sell different types of liquid vitamins, which are more bioavailable compared to pills and capsules. So during the pandemic, we had to cope with production, scaling up production in a very short space of time. But then with Brexit, we had, because we send a lot into Europe, into Ireland, into Holland, Germany, lots of different European countries, and exactly the same with Helen. It was an absolute nightmare to get any of our B2B orders and D2C orders into other countries. So what we ended up doing was setting up a company in Ireland, and we set up a company in Ireland and a warehouse in Ireland. So now all of our European distribution and business is done via our Irish warehouse and business. So it makes it much easier to get into Europe. The Irish company also owns a warehouse in Venlo, which is on the German border in the Netherlands. So that allows us to have next day delivery to pretty much the majority of Europe. But that's all controlled from our Yorzuki entity in Ireland. And that's how we got over the Brexit situation. So there's a lot of investment to actually do this, a lot of time and energy. But that was the only way we could keep up the customer service and actually get products into the customer's hands and into Holland and Barrett in the Benelux regions without going through numerous issues sending it directly from the UK. So it has been a massive headache, but we've managed to overcome it. And we do a lot of business in the USA. So we're sold in about 2,000 stores in the USA in a retailer called GNC. And we had set up a 3PL warehouse in the USA in California. That does all the distribution into the USA. So it's been very challenging, extremely challenging.
So Thomas, I think it's safe to say both Helen and Marcus have outlined the challenge that Brexit brought. Is that something that was echoed when you've spoken to other businesses? And they've both come up with different ways of tackling the same problem. Have you seen other innovative solutions to that challenge?
Yes, absolutely. And what both Helen and Marcus have described is a common themes from engaging with businesses, not just in the north, but across the whole of the UK. There are many responses, and every business, every company will have their own way and best way of responding. I think kind of one of the things for me that my department has been able to do is respond to that with the use of our trade advisors, for example, our enhanced support service for exporters as well, which has one of the upsides of the pandemic, and there are very few upsides of the pandemic, let's be clear, has been the use of the hybrid technology and the fact that we can now talk to many more businesses far more quickly and provide that kind of advice for them to help them overcome some of the issues that they're facing. Clearly, Brexit has increased the burden on some businesses with trading, both exporting and importing into UK, as well as kind of within the UK as well. And then, again, the pandemic has likewise impacted not just trade, but obviously the ability to actually do business within this country as well. The good news is that, we are certainly seeing kind of the bounce back from those kind of initial impacts already. So up to the end of 2021, exports had risen by 2.3% compared to the previous year. So we are seeing the green shoots of recovery from exporters. Something which we are working really hard on is not just making sure that businesses are getting the right advice, but making sure that the market conditions are there to help them benefit from opportunities, not just with Europe, but actually more further afield. So, we are going through a series of free trade agreement negotiations, but we also do some things which are far more focused and specialist. So, opening up specific markets for specific products. So, if there are barriers to specific products being exported, tell us, we can hopefully try and work those through and ensure that you can export to new markets and in effect insulate yourselves against some of the specific issues that come with exporting to one region only.
Picking up on that, I think we clearly all know the disruption that the last sort of 2 years has caused sort of everyone, but it's often thought that disruption can bring opportunities. Have you, Helen or Marcus, seen any opportunities coming out of that? More interest in products or rethinking perhaps your approach? I know, Marcus, you said you've opened set up a separate company in Ireland. Has that created new opportunities for you? Oh, Marcus, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, definitely. So Ireland is now one of our biggest markets in Europe. I think a big part of it has been able to deliver pallets of stock next day to the retailers. And I think a lot of our European and Irish partners were hesitant about placing orders from our UK warehouse because they know how much of an issue it is to get it from the UK to Ireland. So yeah, it's made it much easier, and it means we can be more aggressive when we're working with distributors and retailers, because we can be confident. We know we have stock in Ireland, we know the products are registered out there, and we know we can get it to them within a space of a couple of days. So it has opened up more opportunity, and it's allowed our business development team to go out to all the countries in Europe to try and get new business in, knowing that we can actually get stock to those countries. Whereas if we just had a warehouse in the UK, we'd probably be more hesitant and less aggressive trying to get new business in, because it would make it harder for the distributors and retailers in other European countries to buy your Zuki products. So it's given us more confidence.
And just on that, I guess, has the challenges that have been you feel going out to Europe impacted competitors looking perhaps from Europe to come into the UK? So has it created more opportunities for you at home as well?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't think so, but I know, because we've been more aggressive compared to some of our competitors and gone, let's just set up in Ireland, let's get a warehouse in Holland, let's get a warehouse in Ireland. Our competitors haven't done that. So it's allowed us to export more, because we're actually going out and doing it. And I think some other companies are maybe sitting around and thinking, hopefully it'll pass by. But from our internal point of view, we've got out there and actually done it and made it happen.
Fantastic. And Helen, yeah, same to you. Have you seen opportunities coming out of this disruption?
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the things we've found is actually the enforced isolation of lockdown and moving everything digitally onto Zoom and Teams meetings. We've found we've got actually a much better working relationship with our teams out in the US, in Singapore, in Dubai, because when it doesn't matter if you're 2 minutes up the road from someone or 2,000 miles away from them, you're having the same sort of format of conversation. You end up with that deeper working relationship, and we've maintained that since obviously with lockdown being released, we've seen more of our local colleagues, but actually maintained the consistency of communication via Zoom with our US teams. I'd also say, actually slightly differently to Marcus, the challenges with Brexit have changed assumptions in the way of, it was almost a default before that if you were going to export, you'd export to Europe first because it was easiest. Now that's not the case. Actually, it's given us a broader focus looking at the wider world and actually where is the best market for our products, not just which one's the easiest to get the product out to. So that's, I think changed the focus a bit, and certainly why we're expanding out in both America, Asia, and Middle East.
And obviously, both Yuzuki and Trio Healthcare take their products internationally. Do you have it? Do you find that how do you find that northern businesses are received, and how important are things like working with the Department for International Trade and other networks into helping you go out into those new markets? Perhaps you first, Marcus.
Yeah, so we worked with the Department of International Trade recently on two of our international partners, so a new company in the UAE. The guy that flew out to London to meet us, or we met in London, and we asked the Department of International Trade to audit their business to make sure they were legitimate and ensure that they had the right credentials, because it's easier to meet someone and they're saying they're going to do all this volume and they've got all this experience. But we work with the Department of International Trade to help legitimize who that company is. So it's helping us as a business make decisions with potential distribution partners, which are worth a lot of money to the business. Because if we're going into a sole distribution agreement with a company who is lied to us, it commercially impacts us massively. So working with the Department of International Trade has really helped from that standpoint. I think being in the north, it has a huge, especially compared to down south, it has a huge advantage because, it's from a warehouse logistics point of view. So we're based in Preston, and it's cheaper. We can have a large warehouse, we can store stock, we can be more aggressive, we can get better margins in products because our overheads aren't as high as compared to having property down south. So I think being up in the north, it's helped us massively. We wouldn't have had the success in our business if we were based in the south of England. I think a big part of our success has been because we're based in the north of England, the employees and staff we have, and And logistically, it's easy to get products to Scotland, easy to get products to Ireland, easy to get products to London. So yeah, it's hugely helped us.
Helen, I can see you nodding along there. You know, how have you found sort of being a northern business when going global?
So actually, we're really lucky being in the industry we're in, because the North of England already has a reputation as a centre of med tech, which is the area we're in. Obviously, with the legacy of having AstraZeneca just up the road from us here, but also the kind of academic side, we've had a lot of support from the universities in the region. So we do a lot of work at the moment with the University of Bradford. We've worked previously with Manchester Uni. And having that kind of recognised academic support for the claims we're putting out there is a real bonus for us.
And Thomas, you know, both Mark has particularly emphasised the importance of and the help that Department for International Affairs provide. I guess you talk about the North of England and the regions globally, you know, in market all the time. How do you find them? How do you find it's received? And, you know, has the concept of the Northern Powerhouse boosted it? And, you know, and how is it going forward now that sort of name is sort of slightly died down, maybe?
It's a really good question, and it's a really difficult thing to answer specifically, but I'll do my best. So just to clarify, I'm actually responsible for the Northern Powerhouse. So I'm responsible for trade investment across the Northern Powerhouse, so not just, you know, the other bits of England. The reality is that, you know, businesses don't win business on being northern. They win because they are, you know, world class, you have great workforces, you know, great products, enabled by being in the north of England. And I think that's a really kind of important point to make. You know, we work really hard overseas, and I'm very proud I have 14 people overseas on trade and investment, you know, helping land investment, but also helping exports from the north of England. And the reality is that kind of what is produced and what is done here in the north stands on its own 2 feet, because it's really high quality stuff. And you know, the kind of the R&D ecosystem, as Helen was talking about there, you know, is a key part of that in many sectors. So the Northern Powerhouse brand doesn't really kind of have a huge impact overseas, but what it does mean here in this country is that we are able to, we have increased funding in the department that we deploy across the north and actually the Midlands as well, you know, to address kind of some of the levelling up issues which have become increasingly more talked about in the past few months with the levelling up white paper. So what that means here is we have more trade advisors compared to the south of England, for example. We also have those overseas, those people overseas that I talked about. We have investment and export champions, so businesses here in the north who champion exporting with their peers, but also businesses who will champion kind of investment and the work that we do as a department, as well as running trade missions as well. So we will take businesses with dignitaries. So we might take ministers, but I mean, for example, we've got a trade mission coming soon with Steve Rotherham and Andy Burnham, the mayors of Metro mayors of Liverpool and Manchester, respectively, to Ireland. So we're taking businesses, and that's what we do. We get the name of the north out there as best we can, take those great businesses with those great products, those great services, and make sure that kind of they get, you know, kind of the best opportunity possible to address some of the levelling up issues which we know exist, but also just make sure that, you know, as UK as a whole benefits from what we've got up here in the north. And what I would say to kind of anyone on this event is, you know, if you've not engaged with us before, type us into Google. You know, we will provide you support. Sometimes if you're a smaller business, it will be through you know, some of our online learning. Our Export Academy, for example, which is relatively recently launched, can help you upskill. If you're slightly larger, you know, you may get support directly from a trade advisor, as I know Helen and Marcus's businesses have. And if you're a, you know, very big organization, then, you know, we'll make sure you've got ambassadors' phone numbers, that sort of thing. That's what we do. That's what we can do.
So actually, Helen and Marcus, and building on what Thomas just said, you know, you obviously both part of experienced exporting businesses now. What advice would you give those that Thomas mentioned there, who are perhaps starting out on their exporting journey and see an opportunity that maybe they can take their business or their product or their ideas overseas? You know, what's the first piece of advice you'd give? And I'll start with you, Helen, if that's okay.
I think my first piece of advice would be find your key partners, find the people out there in either the markets you're going for, or, as I said before, in terms of just freight forwarders, so people that you trust, that you can get, that are experts in this area already. I think I mentioned before, we have a business director in Singapore who covers the Asia Pac region for us. There's a huge amount of knowledge there, and just having someone in the right time zones helps with that. And similarly, our business director in the Middle East, covering that region, there's a lot of cultural and regulatory quirks in that region, that having someone who knows it in depth, that you trust out there, can really, really help that. I would say, don't try and do it on your own. I think our experience of trying to ship something from here to Germany on our own was would confirm that one. And yeah, use the resources that are out there. As Thomas said, that there's a lot of advice that you can get. But otherwise, I'd say go for it. It's really rewarding getting your business international.
Same question then to you, Marcus.
I think looking back now, we were very aggressive trying to go after everywhere overnight. And if I was to give advice, to someone in a similar situation, I'd say start off really small. Find one market first. So, for example, for us, we're in the vitamin market. So Germany is one of the biggest markets in Europe for vitamins. So I would say specifically target that country first. Get the help from the DIT in terms of market size, potential distributors, potential marketing channels, potential online platforms, and then go in slowly, really nail that process of how to get into another country. Once you've proven you can get into, for example, Germany, and you can trade and sell and make profit, just replicate that process into Spain, into Holland, and into other countries, and then you can scale much faster. So I'd really nail down one country first and understand the whole process, and then go from there. But it's worth noting that, I guess, in the same with Helen's industry and our industry, a lot of countries require different paperwork. So Germany may require certain certificates and paperwork, as opposed to Holland may require something else. So that's something what the DIT can help with in terms of what paperwork is actually needed to trade in those countries. But I would start off small and then dominate that first territory and then move elsewhere.
And Helen, you mentioned earlier that perhaps Brexit had created the opportunity for you to look beyond Europe as the target market. Now, where is it? Where's plan? What's next in terms of the global ambitions for Trio?
So, ambitions-wise, we're not thinking small this year. We're launching a brand new technology for the ostomy market. That basically we are hoping to change the standard of care globally for ostomates. But in the interest of focusing down, we're not going everywhere at once. Our key market this year beyond the UK is going to be the US. We've actually got a direct team there now managing that for us. Just in terms of the market globally, that's a huge opinion leader. If we can get the US, pretty much everywhere else will follow by default, she says. But that's the plan anyway. So massive expansion into the US this year, and then limited expansions in Europe and Asia in the meantime. And hopefully once the US is grounded, we will go fully global.
Well, I like the ambitious but curtailed ambition as well at the same time. Just go after the biggest market. It's it's not that hard, is it? Thomas, I guess what is it you're hoping to see now that we're in this new post-Brexit, post-pandemic, dare I say it, world from businesses across the Northern Powerhouse in terms of looking globally, and is there any markets that you see real opportunities for the North to enter?
Well, I mean, what I want to see is more exporters exporting more. So we published towards the end of 2021 our export strategy, which was a bit of a refresh from the previous one, because the feedback had been continuity was important for businesses, but also stakeholders. And in that we talk about kind of the race to 1 trillion. So we are hoping to get to £1 trillion worth of exports well in advance of 2030. And the question is, how quickly can we get there? And actually, there are many businesses across the north of England who have a service or a good that could be traded, but who aren't. So I want them to, dip their toe into exporting, maybe by giving us a call first and letting us support them, or perhaps by talking to their peers and finding out how they've done it. And I want existing exporters really to kind of continue to grow, as Helen and Marcus have outlined today. So, in terms of markets, I mean, it depends on which sector you're in. Let's be honest. There are some growth areas for some sectors which will not be growth areas for other sectors. And so, kind of understanding those markets, dominating it. I like that phrase that Marcus used earlier. Understand, dominate in in the right way for your particular product, service, whatever it is. Which for some might be Germany, for others it might be something in the Americas, it might be something in Asia as well. So I think it's just about kind of understanding and knowing, and part of that is coming and talking to us. We can also help not just with the advice and kind of the guidance, we can also help source opportunities as well. So those people who I have overseas are there kind of identifying opportunities. So someone wants to buy something. And if we've got something in the north that could be bought, then great. We've started to connect, opportunity together. But we also provide funding as well. So, it is possible to apply for grant funding. We have an internationalization fund for smaller businesses where they can apply to up to £9,000 of matched funding, depending on where you are across the north. Which can help you internationalize your business. For example, perhaps translate a website, perhaps some other advice. So, talk to us and we can help signpost you in the direction of things like that. So, it's huge opportunity. That's kind of one of the key takeaways. We are working very hard as a department, and you would have probably picked up about the New Zealand Free Trade Agreement negotiations, to make sure we're opening up markets and access for the freest trade possible, all around the world. New Zealand is geographically a very long way away, but if free trade is simplified and there's a legal system that's very, very similar to ours, for example, there's a common language, actually, does it matter for many people if their good goes on an aeroplane for 24 hours or for 3 hours? The reality is it's exported, and you are growing and you're benefiting from the work that you've done, but also the department has done as well.
Fantastic. And Marcus, I guess same question to you as I did to Helen. You've talked about being a quite aggressive strategy for Europe recently. What's next for Yazuki, and where are you hoping to take it?
I think it's in the USA. We're already listed out there, and there's a lot of potential in the USA, but it requires a hell of a lot of capital to be properly aggressive in the USA. So I think our main focus is going to be working on deals in Asia with distributors, not retailers. So at the moment, we're sold in retailers in the USA who can order, say, X amount of stock, and then they've got payment terms. Whereas if we're working with an international distributor in South Korea or Hong Kong or Singapore, who in the Middle East, everything's made to order. So they may order a couple of containers and it's all pro forma. So it's much easier from a cash flow point of view. So yeah, I think we really want to dominate a few of the European countries, continue ticking along in the USA, but have more of a focus on different markets in Asia.
And just picking up on that point you made there of utilizing distributors, is that a lesson that you feel you learned the hard way? Going to direct to retailers, then looking at distributors. Do you see that as a learning you wish you'd known perhaps earlier in the career?
No, you're completely right. So we got this retail listing about just over a year or so ago, and fantastic orders, great orders, but you have to hold a lot of stock. So you've got a lot of cash tied up in stock. The payment terms with these much bigger retailers aren't the best. Whereas if you're working with a distributor, it's much easier to go payment up front, and you have to order minimum order quantity of X amount of units. And that's great for cash flow. You don't have to have loads of money in stock. You can manufacture to order. Whereas with a retailer, it's different because they'll order what they need and when they need it. So it's a big learning curve for us as a business. Is initially, from a cash flow point of view, it's easier to work with bigger distributors, and it's payment up front, and you have set minimum order quantities, so it's easier to manufacture. A retailer is different, and they would never agree to certain minimum order quantities in our industry anyway, and they just draw down the stock they require into each store. So it has been, it's been a good learning curve. It's been good for the business, but it has been a headache.
And Helen, is there anything you wish that you could tell a younger self? Relating to transport, relating to export. Sorry, I should specify that.
I think I would go with having that help up front in terms of having your freight forwarder on speed dial, having the export advice from both Thomas's department, Chamber of Commerce, all the help that's out there with that, and having that base before you start, rather than trying to do it, failing, trying again, failing. Have that in place and go for it. We got there, but I can't say it's been an easy 2 years.
And then I guess lastly to you, Thomas, to sort of bring this home, what is it that you would like to give to all, you would like to say to all those businesses that are contemplating exporting, and what advice would be that one bit of advice? And I know you're probably going to say call DIT, but is there anything beyond the obvious?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting listening to Helen and Marcus. I mean, almost every exporter I've ever spoken to has made mistakes at some point along the line. The really great ones, and we're talking to two of them now, aren't we? The really great ones have stuck with it, have kept going and not been dissuaded by small setbacks. So really, kind of aside from looking us up, giving us a call, I would say keep going, persevere, because the benefits do outweigh those costs. And actually those costs in terms of time and energy and emotion, they do diminish over time as you become more familiar. Once you've exported once, although the specifics will be different in different markets and perhaps with different products, actually conceptually you will have kind of got most of the building blocks together. You will sort of know what to do and how to do it. So I would say, just keep going and give the IT a call.
So no, that's fantastic. Thank you very much to all my panelists. And I think it's clear that the opportunity for export is vast, and actually you do just have to be brave and do it. But I'm sure Marcus and Helen, despite the sleepless nights they have mentioned, would say it has been rewarding, as Thomas said. And yes, if you do need any advice, the Department for International Trade will be available. So I'm sure they'd be able to put you in the right direction. Thank you very much. And that actually brings an end to this pillar of the of Invest North 2022. I would like to thank our pillar sponsor, Squire Patton Boggs, all the participants who've covered such an array of topics this morning. And then I would also like to direct you towards the Reinvention of Towns session, which is currently taking place on the blue stage. The pink stage will be back at 12, but until then, and I will be back later on this afternoon talking about talent. So thank you very much. And yes, I look forward to seeing you later.